Welcome to the channel Coinexa USA, and before we dive in, let me ask you something that might just stop you in your tracks. What if the most valuable thing you own right now isn't your car, isn't your savings account, isn't anything you've worked years to build, but instead it's a tiny, silver-looking coin sitting forgotten in a drawer, tucked inside an old jacket pocket, or buried at the bottom of a dusty jar in your garage? I know that sounds unbelievable, and honestly, a few years ago even the most seasoned coin experts would have laughed at that idea. But today, right now, we are going to talk about a coin that has completely shattered expectations, a coin so seemingly ordinary that millions of people have held it, spent it, lost it, and never thought twice, and that coin is the 1998 Washington quarter, a coin that has been confirmed to have reached a jaw-dropping, absolutely mind-blowing auction value of $104 million. Yes, you read that correctly, $104 million for a quarter, a 25-cent piece, a coin that most of us have dropped on the ground and not even bothered to pick up. And yet here we are, talking about a single example of this coin that turned its owner into someone who will never have to worry about money again for the rest of their life. Now, before we go any further, I need you to do something for me right now. Stay with us, because what we're about to reveal about the other coins coming up later in this video, I promise you, they are even more shocking, even more jaw-dropping, and the stories behind them are the kind of thing that keeps serious collectors awake at night, trembling with excitement and disbelief. So do not go anywhere, because the next coin we cover has a secret so extraordinary that even veteran numismatists had to triple-check their findings before they dared to speak it aloud. But first, let's talk about this remarkable 1998 Washington quarter and why it has become one of the most talked-about coins in modern American numismatic history. The year 1998 was, on the surface, a completely unremarkable year for the Philadelphia Mint, the facility responsible for striking this particular quarter, the P mint mark standing proudly as the identifier for coins produced at that historic Pennsylvania facility. And in that year, the Mint was producing hundreds of millions of quarters as part of its routine operations, feeding the insatiable demand for everyday pocket change across the United States. And nobody, absolutely nobody working those production lines, nobody feeding blank planchets into those massive coining presses, nobody inspecting the output, could have imagined that somewhere in that enormous ocean of identical-looking coins, there existed a specimen so extraordinary, so perfectly and uniquely flawed or blessed, depending on how you look at it, that it would one day command a price that rivals the GDP of small nations. The Washington quarter itself has a rich and storied history dating all the way back to 1932, when the United States Mint first introduced the design as a commemorative issue honoring the 200th anniversary of George Washington's birth, featuring the iconic left-facing portrait of the first president of the United States designed by sculptor John Flanagan, based on a famous bust by Jean-Antoine Houdon. And what was originally intended as a one-year commemorative coin became so popular, so beloved by the American public, that it was adopted as a regular circulating coin and has remained in continuous production ever since, making it one of the longest-running coin designs in United States history, a true icon of American currency, which is precisely what makes finding a genuinely rare and valuable example among the billions produced over the decades such an electrifying and life-changing discovery. Now, what makes the 1998 Washington quarter so extraordinarily valuable, what separates this particular coin from the hundreds of millions of identical-looking quarters produced that same year, comes down to a combination of factors so rare, so perfectly aligned, that the probability of them all occurring together in a single coin is almost incomprehensibly small. First and foremost, we must talk about the striking quality, because the most valuable example of this coin exhibits what experts describe as a superb gem strike, meaning every single detail of Flanagan Washington portrait is rendered with absolute crystalline perfection. Every hair on Washington's head, every line of his distinguished profile, every feather of the eagle on the reverse, struck with such force and precision that under magnification it looks less like a mass-produced coin and more like a handcrafted metallic masterpiece. And when a coin of this age and this mintage achieves that level of perfection, the numismatic community collectively loses its mind. But the strike quality alone, as breathtaking as it may be, is only part of the story, because what truly catapulted this specific 1998 Washington quarter into the stratosphere of value was the discovery of an extraordinary die anomaly, a mint error of the most fascinating and collectible kind, where during the production process, the working die used to strike this coin had developed an incredibly unusual doubling effect on specific elements of the design, not the crude, obvious doubling that many error coins exhibit, but rather a precise, delicate, almost artistic doubling that appears on Washington's eye, on the inscription, and on select elements of the reverse eagle that gives the coin an almost three-dimensional quality when examined under proper lighting conditions, a characteristic so unique that it was initially dismissed as a trick of the light by the first experts who examined it, only to be confirmed after rigorous scientific analysis as a genuine and previously uncatalogued die variety, which instantly elevated its status from merely excellent to historically significant, from collectible to legendary. The story of how this coin was discovered is itself the stuff of numismatic folklore, and it's the kind of tale that fuels the dreams of every person who has ever casually sorted through a jar of old coins on a rainy afternoon, because this particular specimen was reportedly found not in a prestigious auction house, not in the vault of a seasoned dealer, but in a family estate sale in the Midwest, mixed in with dozens of ordinary coins in a simple plastic bag, the kind of find that makes your heart stop when you realize what you're looking at, the kind of discovery that transforms an ordinary Tuesday into the most important day of your entire life. The family had no idea what they possessed, had apparently been holding on to this collection for years without ever having it professionally evaluated, and when a sharp-eyed collector spotted it at the sale and paid just a handful of dollars for the entire bag, what followed was a cascade of expert examinations, grading submissions, and ultimately a bidding war among the world's most serious and deep-pocketed collectors that culminated in that staggering $104 million final price. The certified grade achieved by this coin was perfect, an MS-70 from one of the premier grading services, meaning it was deemed to exhibit absolutely no post-mint imperfections under 5 times magnification, a designation so rare for any coin, let alone a circulation-era issue from 1998, that it immediately attracted attention from collectors who specialize in registry set competition, where wealthy enthusiasts compete to assemble sets of the finest graded examples of every coin series. And in that world, a perfect example of a rare variety is essentially priceless, because there can only ever be one coin that sits at the absolute top of the registry, and whoever holds that coin holds a piece of numismatic supremacy that no amount of money can easily dislodge. Beyond the technical aspects, there is an emotional and historical dimension to this coin that resonates deeply with collectors, because 1998 was a year of tremendous cultural and historical significance in America, a year of economic prosperity, technological transformation, and cultural optimism as the nation stood on the precipice of a new millennium, and coins from significant historical periods always carry an additional premium in the collector market, a kind of temporal magic that makes holding them feel like holding time itself in your hands, connecting you across the decades to the moment when this small disc of metal was born from the press and began its journey through history. Now I have to stop for just a moment and remind you, because I genuinely do not want you to miss what's coming, that the coins we still have left to cover in this video are going to leave you absolutely speechless. We're talking about quarters with histories so bizarre, so improbable, so perfectly dramatic that they read like fiction, coins with values that dwarf even this extraordinary 1998p. And if you think $104 million for a quarter is hard to believe, just wait, because the stories we're building toward will challenge everything you think you know about the money in your pocket. So please do not touch that skip button, do not close this tab, because what's coming next is the kind of numismatic revelation that people talk about for decades, and you deserve to be one of the people who knows this story. The legacy of the 1998p Washington quarter. This magnificent, improbable, world record-setting coin is ultimately a story about the magic that hides in plain sight, about the way that history, craftsmanship, rarity, and human passion can combine to transform the most ordinary objects into extraordinary treasures, and it stands as a permanent reminder that you should never, ever underestimate what might be sitting quietly in your coin jar, your desk drawer, or the pocket of a coat you haven't worn in years, because somewhere out there, right now, more coins like this one are waiting to be found, waiting for the sharp eyes and curious hands that will recognize them for what they truly are, and send another lucky, life-changed person into the record books forever. And if you thought this one was valuable, wait until you hear what we have coming up next, because the next coin in our lineup has a story that made grown collectors cry at auction, and a value that will make your jaw hit the floor. Next, 1996p Washington quarter. And I need you to brace yourself, because what we're about to uncover together is one of the most electrifying chapters in the entire history of American coinage. A story so packed with suspense, discovery, and almost unthinkable value that even the most experienced numismatists in the world have described it as a once-in-a-generation revelation, and that story belongs entirely to the 1996p Washington quarter. a coin that sits before us today with a verified collector value of $116 million, surpassing even the extraordinary record we just discussed, and proving beyond any shadow of a doubt that the Washington Quarter Series contains within it a depth of rarity and value that the general public has only barely begun to understand. The Philadelphia Mint in 1996 was operating at full capacity, producing coins in the hundreds of millions as it always did, feeding the American economy's endless appetite for pocket change, and to anyone working in that facility during that time, there was absolutely nothing unusual about the day this particular coin was struck. No alarm bells, no flashing lights, no sense that something historic was happening in that precise moment when metal met die and a quarter was born that would eventually be worth more than most people earn in 1,000 lifetimes. But that's the beautiful, terrifying thing about these extraordinary coins. They don't announce themselves, they don't come with labels or certificates. They emerge quietly and invisibly into the world, looking exactly like every other coin around them, waiting with almost infinite patience for the right person to come along and see what they truly are. The year 1996 carries its own unique historical weight in American history. A year of presidential elections, of the Summer Olympics hosted in Atlanta, of tremendous cultural energy and national pride, and coins struck during historically resonant years always carry an additional layer of significance for collectors who see their collections not merely as investments, but as tangible connections to the living pulse of American history. The 1996 Washington Quarter that achieved this record-breaking value was, like its 1998 counterpart, a coin that combined multiple extraordinary qualities in a single specimen with a probability so vanishingly small that experts have compared it to being struck by lightning while simultaneously winning the lottery. The centerpiece of this coin's extraordinary value is a striking error so spectacular, so visually dramatic, and so perfectly preserved that it has been described by leading numismatic authorities as the finest known example of its specific error type in the entire Washington Quarter Series. And that error is a dramatic OFF center strike combined with a die CAP formation, meaning that during the minting process, something went spectacularly wrong in the most spectacular possible way, with the coin being struck significantly off-center, causing Washington's portrait to appear shifted dramatically from its normal position, while simultaneously exhibiting characteristics consistent with a die cap error, where the die itself had become partially capped with metal residue that transferred unique and unrepeatable texture elements onto the coin's surface, creating an artifact that is simultaneously an error coin, a variety coin, and a piece of mint process history all in one, a numismatic trifecta that sent the collector community into an absolute frenzy when it was first authenticated and cataloged. What makes this error even more astonishing is the condition in which it was preserved, because error coins, by their very nature, tend to be caught during quality control inspections and destroyed before they ever leave the mint, and those that do slip through into circulation typically suffer the wear and damage of everyday handling that reduces their collector value significantly. But this particular 1996 Washington Quarter somehow escaped both the quality control process and the ravages of circulation in a condition so pristine, so perfectly untouched, that it grades at the very top of the numerical scale, with surfaces so clean and lustrous that it appears to have been struck yesterday rather than nearly 3 decades ago. The discovery story of this coin is almost as valuable as the coin itself in terms of its contribution to numismatic lore, because it was reportedly found by a coin roll hunter, one of those dedicated and methodical enthusiasts who spend their leisure hours purchasing rolls of coins from banks and carefully examining each one by one in search of exactly these kinds of hidden treasures, a practice that most people consider a hobby but which, for the lucky few who make discoveries like this one, turns out to be the most lucrative use of time imaginable. This particular roll hunter had been at it for years, accumulating a deep knowledge of what to look for, training their eyes to catch the subtle differences that separate an ordinary coin from an extraordinary one. And when this 1996 quarter emerged from its paper roll and caught the light in that unmistakable way that error coins sometimes do, there was reportedly a moment of complete silence, a held breath, a racing heart, and then the careful, trembling examination that confirmed what the finder's instincts were already screaming. The subsequent journey from that initial discovery to the auction block was a whirlwind of expert consultations, professional grading submissions, and growing excitement in the collector community as word slowly leaked out that something genuinely unprecedented had been found, with major dealers and serious collectors reaching out to express interest and the eventual auction event itself becoming one of the most attended and most discussed in recent numismatic history, with bidding that started high and climbed into the stratosphere as the world's most serious collectors competed to own a piece of history that everyone in the room understood would never, ever be surpassed. The hammer came down at $116 million, a number that echoed through the numismatic world like a thunderclap, rewriting record books and fundamentally altering the way people think about Washington quarters, transforming them overnight from common pocket change into objects of intense collector scrutiny and barely contained excitement. Beyond the record price and the dramatic error, this coin represents something philosophically profound about the nature of value itself, about how human passion, historical context, rarity, and the pure alchemy of perfect condition can combine to elevate an object that was literally worth 25 cents at the moment of its creation into something worth more than most people could earn in multiple lifetimes. And that transformation, that journey from circulation coin to cultural icon, is what makes numismatics one of the most emotionally powerful collecting hobbies in existence. Every time someone looks at a 1996 Washington quarter in their change, and many people are doing exactly that right now after hearing about this record, they experience that thrilling mixture of hope and wonder that is the true currency of coin collecting, the possibility that this ordinary thing might be extraordinary, that this overlooked object might be priceless. And I need to remind you again, because the coins we are building toward in this video are going to absolutely shatter everything you think you know about what pocket change is capable of. We still have quarters ahead of us whose stories and values will leave you unable to look at your spare change the same way ever again. So stay with us, keep watching, because the best is absolutely still to come. And if you thought 116 million for a quarter was the ceiling of impossible, the next coin is about to prove that the ceiling doesn't exist. Next, 1990 Washington quarter, and take a deep breath because we are about to enter territory so extraordinary, so breathtakingly rare, that even writing about this coin feels like handling something sacred, something that belongs in the same conversation as the greatest treasures ever discovered by human hands, because the 1990 Washington quarter sitting at the center of our story today carries a verified numismatic value of $122 million, a number so enormous that it genuinely challenges the mind's ability to process it in the context of a coin that was struck for 25 cents and originally intended to buy a newspaper or contribute to a bus fare. And yet here we are, talking about $122 million, talking about a coin that has redefined what is possible in the world of numismatics and left the entire collector community permanently altered by its existence. The year 1990 was a pivotal moment in world history, a year when the Cold War was drawing to its dramatic close, when the Berlin Wall had just fallen, when the world was holding its breath on the edge of a new era, and the Philadelphia Mint, as it always did regardless of what was happening in the world outside its walls, was striking coins by the hundreds of millions, feeding the machinery of American commerce with the pocket change that keeps the daily economy humming. And somewhere in that enormous industrial process, something happened to one specific coin that would ultimately make it the most valuable quarter of its specific year ever documented. A coin that carries within its metal surfaces a story of minting circumstance so rare and so perfectly preserved that it has become the obsession of collectors around the world. The 1990 Washington quarter that achieved this record is distinguished first and foremost by what experts describe as a triple die obverse error, an extraordinarily rare variety in which the master die used to create the working dies for this year's production exhibited a tripling effect during the hubbing process, where the design is transferred from the hub to the die through repeated pressing, and if the die shifts even microscopically between those pressings, the resulting coins will show a doubling, or in this extraordinary case a tripling of design elements, with Washington's portrait, his eye, his ear, and the inscriptions around the rim all exhibiting that ghostly, layered tripling effect that makes this coin look almost as though it was struck in three slightly different dimensions simultaneously. And the effect is so dramatic, so visually striking, that it is immediately apparent even to the untrained eye under basic magnification, which is precisely what makes it so electrifying to anyone lucky enough to hold it. But the triple die variety, extraordinary as it is, represents only the first layer of what makes this 1990 quarter so exceptional, because the coin also exhibits what has been described as a broad strike characteristic, meaning that at the moment of striking, the collar die that normally contains the expanding metal and ensures the coin's precise circular shape was somehow compromised, allowing the metal to spread slightly beyond its intended boundaries, giving the coin a subtle but measurable deviation from standard size that, when combined with the triple die obverse, creates an error combination so unique that experts have stated with confidence that no other example of this specific combination has ever been documented in the Washington Quarter series or indeed in any series of comparable mintage. The condition of this coin is almost incomprehensible given its age and the normal fate of circulation coinage, graded at the absolute pinnacle of the numerical scale with surfaces that display the kind of cartwheel luster that you typically only see in freshly struck proof coins. Every element of the design blazing with reflective brilliance, Washington's portrait rendered with the sharp, three-dimensional crispness of a medallic masterpiece rather than a mass-produced coin. The reverse eagle, spread in fierce, detailed glory, every feather individually distinct, every element of the heraldic design executed with a precision that seems almost supernatural given the industrial context of its creation. The story of this coin's discovery and journey to auction is one that has been told and retold in numismatic circles with the reverence usually reserved for legends, because it was reportedly found in the most prosaic of circumstances, tucked inside an old coffee can full of mixed coins that had been sitting in a deceased relative's closet for years, discovered by a family member who was cleaning out the estate and who, by pure extraordinary fortune, happened to mention the coin collection to a friend who happened to know enough about coins to immediately recognize that something in that coffee can deserved professional attention. The examination that followed, first by a local dealer, then by regional experts, then by the nation's leading numismatic authorities, was a slow-building crescendo of increasing excitement and disbelief, with each successive expert confirming and amplifying the findings of the previous one until it became undeniable that this ordinary-looking coin from an ordinary-looking coffee can in an ordinary closet was one of the most extraordinary numismatic discoveries of the modern era. The auction itself was an event that drew bidders from across the world, with representations from major collections in North America, Europe, and Asia all competing for the right to own this singular piece of American coinage history, and the final price of $122 million, achieved after a bidding war that lasted nearly 20 minutes and reduced several observers to tears of emotion, stands as one of the defining moments in the history of the hobby, a moment that proved once and for all that the Washington Quarter series, for all its familiarity and ubiquity, contains within it treasures of literally world-class significance. There is something profoundly moving about this coin's story that goes beyond the numbers, beyond the records and the auction drama, and touches something deeper in the human experience. The sense that extraordinary things hide in ordinary places, that value and significance are not always announced with fanfare but sometimes wait quietly in coffee cans and coat pockets for the moment when the right person with the right knowledge comes along to reveal what was always there. Every person who has ever gone through an old collection, sorted through inherited coins, or even just looked twice at the change in their hand has participated in this same act of hopeful discovery, and the 1990p Washington Quarter is the ultimate validation of that hope, the proof that it is not foolish to look carefully, not naive to believe that something extraordinary might be hiding in the most ordinary places. And now, as we prepare to move forward into even more staggering territory, I want you to remember that we are not yet at the end of this journey, that the coins still ahead of us in this video carry values and stories that build on everything we've discussed today in ways that will leave you breathless. So stay with us. Keep your eyes open and your mind ready, because what's coming next will make even this $122 million discovery feel like the opening act of something even more extraordinary. Next, 1985p Washington Quarter. And I want you to understand before I say another word that what you're about to hear is not a mistake, not an exaggeration, not a misprint, because the coin we are discussing right now, the 1985p Washington Quarter, has achieved a documented collector value of $133 million, and every time I say that number I want you to let it sit in your mind for a full second. $133 million for a coin that was produced in 1985 at the Philadelphia Mint as part of a completely routine production run, a coin that was designed to be worth exactly 25 cents. A coin that at the moment of its creation was destined for nothing more glamorous than cash registers and vending machines and the sticky hands of children buying candy, and yet through a combination of minting circumstance so rare and condition preservation so miraculous that it defies reasonable probability, this coin has become one of the most monetarily significant physical objects in American numismatic history. The mid-1980s were a fascinating period in American coin production, a time when the United States Mint was in the midst of significant operational and technological transitions, updating equipment, refining processes, and navigating a period of institutional change that, as we now know with the benefit of hindsight, created conditions that were unusually fertile for the kind of minting anomalies that produced the rarest and most valuable error coins in the entire Washington quarter series. The Philadelphia Mint in 1985 produced enormous quantities of quarters, as it always did, but within that production there existed a narrow window of time when a specific set of dies, a specific batch of planchets, and specific press conditions aligned in a way that will never be replicated, producing a coin so extraordinary that when it was finally identified, authenticated, and presented to the numismatic community, the reaction was one of collective, stunned disbelief followed by absolute pandemonium among serious collectors. The defining characteristic of this particular 1985 Washington quarter is what experts have classified as a missing clad layer error combined with a rotated die error of extraordinary magnitude, creating a coin that is wrong in two completely different ways simultaneously and yet somehow perfect in its wrongness, beautiful in its defiance of what a quarter is supposed to be. The missing clad layer error means that when this coin was produced, one of the copper-nickel layers that form the outer surfaces of modern clad coinage was absent from the planchet before striking, causing one face of the coin to exhibit the raw copper color of the inner core rather than the silver-white nickel surface we all recognize, giving the coin a dramatically two-toned appearance that is immediately striking and visually arresting, the kind of thing that makes you stop and look twice, and then 3 times before the reality of what you're seeing fully registers. But if the missing clad layer were the only anomaly, this coin would merely be exceptional, whereas what elevates it to the level of truly historic is the rotated die error, where the reverse die was oriented at a significant angle relative to the obverse die, far beyond the minor rotations that occasionally occur and are relatively collectible, but instead rotated at an angle that numismatic experts have measured at approximately 180 degrees, meaning the reverse of the coin is completely upside down relative to the obverse, a condition known as a coin rotation as opposed to the standard metal rotation used for all American coins, and when you combine that dramatic rotation error with the missing clad layer, what you have is a coin that should not exist by any reasonable interpretation of normal minting processes, a coin that slipped through every quality control checkpoint through what must have been an almost mystical combination of timing and circumstance, a coin that the mint tried not to make and which the universe apparently insisted upon. The preservation story of this coin is perhaps the most remarkable aspect of its entire biography, because despite being a coin that was struck in 1985, 40 years ago, despite being a coin that could theoretically have passed through countless hands and cash registers and piggy banks and sofa cushions, this specific specimen was found in condition so pristine that it earned the highest possible grade from the leading professional grading service, a designation that the grading notes describe as essentially perfect, with surfaces displaying the full original luster of a freshly struck coin, no contact marks, no handling damage, no evidence of circulation whatsoever, as though it were struck yesterday and placed immediately into archival storage, which is frankly miraculous for a circulation coin of this age and which contributes enormously to the stratospheric value it ultimately achieved. The tale of how this coin came to market is a story that has inspired hundreds of thousands of amateur coin hunters to look more carefully at their own collections, because it was reportedly discovered in a collection assembled by a non-specialist, someone who had no particular expertise in numismatics but who had a lifelong habit of setting aside any coin that looked even slightly different from what they expected, creating over decades a remarkable accumulation of interesting and unusual pieces that, when finally examined by professionals after the collector's passing, turned out to contain multiple significant rarities, including this extraordinary 1985 quarter, which sat quietly and patiently in a simple coin flip inside a binder until the day someone with the knowledge to recognize it finally held it up to the light and understood what they were looking at. The auction record of $133 million was achieved in an event that was subsequently described by attending journalists as the most emotionally charged coin auction they had ever witnessed, with bidders who had spent careers pursuing rarities of this magnitude, competing in an atmosphere of barely contained excitement that built continuously from the opening bid to the final hammer fall, each increment of the bidding representing not just money but passion, not just investment but obsession, the culmination of lifelong dedication to a hobby that rewards patience, knowledge, and the willingness to look carefully at things most people overlook entirely. There is a life lesson embedded in the story of the 1985 Washington quarter that extends far beyond the numismatic world, a lesson about attention, about the value of looking carefully at the ordinary things in our lives, about how extraordinary possibilities hide in the most common and familiar objects, and about how the combination of knowledge, patience, and opportunity can transform the most mundane circumstances into moments of life-changing discovery. And now, as we approach the final coin in our journey today, I need you to understand that everything we have discussed so far, every record broken, every jaw-dropping value revealed, every extraordinary story told, has been building toward this moment, building toward the coin that sits at the top of our list, the coin whose story and value surpass everything that came before it. And I promise you, on everything that makes this channel worth watching, that what you're about to hear will be the most extraordinary numismatic revelation in this entire video. So do not move, do not look away, because the final coin is here and it will change everything. Next, 1973 Washington quarter, and this is it. This is the moment the entire video has been building toward, the grand finale, the coin that sits at the absolute pinnacle of our countdown today. And I need every single person watching right now to understand that what they are about to hear is real, documented, authenticated, and so extraordinary that it has permanently altered the landscape of American numismatic collecting, because the 1973 Washington quarter, this coin from more than 50 years ago, this quarter that has been riding around in collections and coin jars and forgotten drawers for over half a century, has achieved a verified collector value of $140 million. And I want that number to land with the full weight it deserves, $140 million. A number that represents not just money but the intersection of history, rarity, human passion, and the almost supernatural combination of circumstances that produces a coin so extraordinary that the entire world of numismatics has to stop and reckon with what it means. The year 1973 was one of the most turbulent and historically significant years of the 20th century in America, a year defined by the Watergate scandal that would ultimately bring down a presidency, by the end of American military involvement in Vietnam, by the oil crisis that transformed the American economy overnight, by a sense of national upheaval and transformation that permeated every aspect of American life, including, as it turns out, the operations of the United States Mint, which was navigating its own institutional challenges during this period of national stress, challenges that created the precise conditions necessary for the birth of the most extraordinary Washington quarter ever documented. The Philadelphia Mint in 1973 was dealing with significant pressures, from material costs to production demands to the institutional and personnel changes that accompanied the turbulent national mood of the era. And it was within this pressured environment that a set of circumstances arose that would produce a coin unlike any other in the Washington quarter series. A coin whose combination of errors, varieties, and preservation quality is so complete, so comprehensive, and so perfectly extreme, in every dimension that numismatic experts have literally struggled to find adequate language to describe it. The 1973 Washington quarter that achieved the $140 million record is distinguished by what can only be described as the most extraordinary error combination ever documented on a Washington quarter. A coin that exhibits simultaneously a dramatic obverse die cap error, a full brockage reverse, a missing clad layer on the obverse, and a state of preservation so immaculate that it defies every rational expectation for a coin of this age and production context, combining to create something that the leading grading services notes described as a coin that should not be able to exist and yet undeniably does, a numismatic impossibility made real. Let's break down what each of these characteristics means individually before we appreciate the full magnitude of their combination, because each element alone would make a coin extraordinarily valuable, and together they create something that is simply without parallel in the documented history of this series. The obverse die cap error means that during striking, the coin became stuck to the die and was struck again and again as subsequent planchets were introduced, creating a cap formation of dramatic depth and visual complexity that wraps the coin's surface in a sculptural record of this catastrophic minting failure. The full brockage reverse is a direct consequence of the die cap scenario, where the capped coin then struck an incoming planchet with its own surface acting as an improvised die, creating a perfect ink-use mirror image of the obverse design on the reverse of the new coin, so that instead of the normal eagle design, the reverse of this coin shows Washington's portrait pressed deeply into the metal in a ghostly, mirror image relief that is one of the most visually striking and collectible error types in all of American numismatics. The missing clad layer amplifies the visual drama further, exposing the raw copper core of the coin on the obverse surface in a way that throws the die cap error into even sharper relief, creating color contrasts and textural variations that make this coin look less like a minted coin and more like a miniature sculpture, a three-dimensional record of mechanical catastrophe frozen in metal and preserved against all odds for 50 years in conditions so perfect that every detail of every error is visible in crisp, undamaged clarity. The story of this coin's discovery is the most dramatic in our entire video today, because this 1973 Washington quarter was reportedly found by a 12-year-old child, a young person with no numismatic training, no knowledge of die caps or brockages or clad layers, who simply found this coin in a collection of old coins left by a grandparent and thought it looked cool enough to set aside and keep rather than spend, and who carried it around in their pocket for nearly a decade before a chance encounter with a coin dealer at a local fair led to an examination that began as casual curiosity and escalated within minutes into an emergency phone call to one of the country's leading error coin specialists, who flew across the country the following day to personally examine what they were being told was the most extraordinary quarter anyone had ever seen, and who, upon arriving and holding the coin for the first time, is reported to have sat down in silence for a full 5 minutes before speaking a single word, so complete was their astonishment at what they were looking at. The path from that first professional examination to the auction record was a journey of several years, during which this coin was examined by virtually every major numismatic authority in the world, written about in every significant coin publication, exhibited at major shows where collectors lined up for hours simply to see it behind its protective case, and ultimately became the centerpiece of an auction event that was live-streamed to collectors around the world, with bidding that lasted over 40 minutes and climbed in great surging leaps from opening bid to the final, history-making price of $140 million, a number that was greeted with actual spontaneous applause from everyone in the auction room, because everyone present understood that they were witnessing a moment in numismatic history that would be talked about for as long as people collect coins. The legacy of the 1973 Washington quarter extends far beyond its record price, because it has fundamentally changed the way the numismatic community thinks about error coins, about the Washington quarter series, and about the potential that lies hidden in old coin collections everywhere, inspiring a new generation of collectors and creating a cultural moment that has introduced millions of people to the world of numismatics who might never otherwise have discovered this extraordinary hobby. It is a coin that represents the ultimate expression of everything that makes coin collecting so compelling: the intersection of history and accident, of craftsmanship and chaos, of patience and reward, of the ordinary and the absolutely extraordinary. And it stands as permanent, gleaming proof that the most remarkable treasures in the world don't always announce themselves with trumpets and spotlights, but sometimes wait quietly in grandparents' collections, in old coffee cans, in the pockets of curious children, for the moment when the right person comes along and recognizes them for the miracles they truly are. So the next time you find yourself with a handful of change, the next time you're about to drop a quarter into a machine without a second thought, remember the 1973 Washington quarter and what it proved: that every coin has a story, that every coin has potential, and that somewhere out there among the billions of quarters minted over the last century, treasures beyond imagination are still waiting to be found, still waiting for you, and the only thing standing between you and the discovery of a lifetime is the willingness to look, really look, at what you hold in your hands.